What do you mean you threw away the wall clock I gave you? It was $3,000. Mother-in-law shot me an angry glare, raising her voice. Isabel, how could you keep something like that in our house, even if it's expensive? I tried to stay calm, but couldn't contain my emotions. I glared back at mother-in-law, expressing my distrust. That beautiful wall clock had an unbelievable twist to it. My name is Sasha. I'm 33. I was proposed to by Daniel, who is 5 years older than me, and we got married. Daniel was my boss at work. I was drawn to him because he was always there for me, not just for work problems, but for personal ones too. I genuinely hoped to get along with mother-in-law and build a good relationship when I decided to marry Daniel. He always wanted us to get married soon. I think my mom would be so happy to meet you before we marry. I've always wanted to meet your mother. Let's definitely go. Daniel's father left a legacy, but passed away early. Being the only child, it seemed Daniel was raised with a lot of care by mother-in-law, and he wanted to give her peace of mind by marrying soon. With butterflies in my stomach, I went with Daniel to his childhood home where mother-in-law was waiting. The moment mother-in-law saw me after answering the doorbell, her expression changed. You look rather plain. Mother-in-law whispered in my ear, ensuring it was barely audible. I was taken aback by the unexpected remark and stared at mother-in-law in shock. Daniel seemed completely unaware of what had just transpired. Come on in and make yourselves at home. As if nothing had happened, mother-in-law invited us inside. Did I just imagine what Isabel said earlier? I was puzzled, but reassured myself that mother-in-law meeting me for the first time couldn't possibly be that rude. Later, when mother-in-law was preparing tea in the kitchen, I went to help, and she started bombarding me with questions. How old are you? What's your educational background? I am 33. I went to a community college and have been working at my current job since graduation. I was taken aback by her sudden questions about my age, but I answered politely. But mother-in-law's attitude changed instantly upon hearing my reply. Not so young, and not very well educated. I wonder what he sees in you. Excuse me? I couldn't hide my shock at this rude remark. Do you really think you're good enough for my son? You're not even that pretty and don't seem to have any redeeming qualities. You don't need to go that far. I wanted adorable grandchildren to show off, but I doubt you can give me that. I can't boast about a daughter-in-law like you. Mother-in-law clearly disapproved of our marriage. How can she demean me like this when her son isn't around? Yet, I didn't want to cause a scene before the wedding and upset Daniel. Honestly, my first impression of mother-in-law was terrible. I didn't want to confront her and make things awkward with Daniel, who's always been caring and kind to me. So I decided to ignore her hurtful comments and endure them. Not long after we had our wedding. Since then, I've been managing both my job and household chores. Daniel, however, didn't help with the chores and left everything to me. Gradually, I felt overwhelmed doing housework alone and decided to talk to Daniel. Could you help a little with the chores? We're both working and doing everything alone is tough. I tried to put it gently, but Daniel's attitude changed sharply. Women are supposed to do the housework. My mom managed everything on her own. Why can't you? But Isabel was a housewife, right? We both work. Anyway, I don't need to do what women should. Just handle it. I can't believe. Since our marriage, Daniel had become cold. He used to be so caring and dependable at work, but now he seems to view me more as a housekeeper than his wife. Furthermore, mother-in-law began to interfere in our married life. Living close to our new home, mother-in-law would frequently drop by. She seemed to monitor me, and any little thing that she didn't approve of, she'd point out. She even threw out my dishes, exclaiming, "This tastes horrible. How can anyone eat this?" And if she found a speck of dust, she'd say, "Look at this dirt," and make me clean repeatedly. You're really an incompetent daughter-in-law. I'm sorry. You're not fit for my son. I should move in and train you right. The idea of living with mother-in-law was horrifying. If we lived together, I envisioned being berated daily and taken advantage of. I appreciate the offer, but I want to spend time with Daniel right now. You're rejecting my generous offer, despite being such a failure of a daughter-in-law? Since then, mother-in-law kept pushing for us to live together. Exhausted, I turned to Daniel. It's your fault you can't get along with Mom. Do your chores properly so she won't worry. Daniel seemed disinterested and didn't take my concerns seriously, leaving me drained dealing with mother-in-law. However, about a week later, mother-in-law stopped coming over and the pressure to live together ceased. Thank God she finally understands how I feel. Surprisingly, she gifted me an antique-looking beautiful wall clock that clearly was expensive. You haven't received a wedding gift yet, right? This clock is worth $3,000. Take good care of it. Thank you so much for this beautiful clock. I felt joy, thinking I was finally accepted as a family member. However, after receiving the clock, mother-in-law's phone calls began to include bizarre comments. If you have time to nap in the living room, you should be doing chores. How did you know I was resting for a bit? I can easily imagine what an inefficient daughter-in-law like you would do. Once might be a coincidence, but after that, frequent calls started coming in with comments like, relying on store-bought meals is lazy, and if you have time to watch TV, you should be doing housework. I was deeply unnerved, wondering how she knew what I was doing. Come to think of it, these calls began right after I received that clock. It felt as though the clock was watching my every move. Could it be? To confirm my suspicion, I took off the clock's cover to inspect the inside. Just as I thought. To my horror, I found something inside. I took a picture of it as evidence and immediately disposed of the clock. That evening when Daniel returned from work, he immediately noticed the clock's absence. Where's the beautiful clock? I got rid of it, because that clock... Before I could explain, Daniel flared up in anger. What? You threw away an important gift from Mom? That's it, we're getting a divorce. Without listening to me, he stormed off to his mother's house. The mention of divorce, especially so soon into our marriage, left me devastated and speechless. He won't even talk or face me. Daniel doesn't trust me. This isn't fair. Overwhelmed with frustration and wanting to change the situation, I decided, I can't let it end like this. The next day, determined to prove my innocence and expose mother-in-law's deeds, I visited her home. Showing up without notice. Clearly your parents didn't raise you right. What do you want? You should know why I'm here. What are you talking about? I disposed of that clock you gave me. It had no place in our home. Mother-in-law's eyes blazed with fury as she shouted hysterically. How could you? Do you know the value of that clock? Must have been valuable to you, considering you could spy on our home with it. Yes, inside that clock was a tiny built-in camera. But when confronted, mother-in-law arrogantly smirked. Caught on quicker than I thought. It was to expose what an inadequate daughter-in-law you are. Excuse me. I thought if my son knew how useless you are, he'd divorce you and find someone better. What you did is a crime. Despite my sincere anger, mother-in-law mocked me with a sarcastic grin. But there is no evidence left, is there? You impulsively threw the clock away, after all. When Daniel finds out about the hidden camera, he won't forgive even you. We'll see. He's on my side. Plus, thanks to the clock, I succeeded in driving a wedge between you two. It was worth every penny. Mother-in-law looked at me with disdain, not showing an ounce of remorse for her actions. I discreetly slipped my hand into my pocket. Her arrogance would be her downfall. Unbeknownst to the smug mother-in-law, I had secretly recorded our entire conversation. Surely playing this record to Daniel would make him understand why I threw away the clock. Since our marriage, Daniel rarely listened to my side of the story, but this time, I hoped he would truly be supportive. That night when Daniel returned home briefly for an errand, I opened up about everything that transpired with mother-in-law. As he listened, his face grew increasingly stern. I thought, finally he understands. But to my surprise, Daniel's response was not what I expected. You and your wild imaginations. Cool your head and apologize to Mom. You don't believe me. I have evidence right here. Why would Mom do such a thing? Stop lying. Just believe me for once. Enough. The only reason I came back was to give you this. Without letting me finish, Daniel presented me with divorce papers. Why couldn't he understand? He had shattered all my hopes. Daniel wasn't willing to listen to me and clearly did not trust me. I had given him one last chance to make things right, but I realized I couldn't stay married to a man like him. Without hesitation, I signed the divorce papers. Later that day, armed with the photographic and recorded evidence, I headed to the police station to take action. It's no joke. I just took a little peek in my daughter-in-law's private life in exchange for giving her an expensive clock. When the police arrived, mother-in-law lashed out, swinging her arms in a frenzy. Her violent outburst led to her being arrested not only for invasion of privacy, but also for assaulting an officer. The commotion drew the attention of many neighbors, and of course, from a distance, I watched as Daniel noticed me and approached, fuming. "What have you done? Release Mom now and apologize." Remember when I tried to tell you about the camera? Had you listened to me, none of this would have happened. But do you really want your own mother to be labeled a criminal? Confronted with the reality of the situation, Daniel's face turned pale, and he profusely apologized. "I was wrong. I'll do anything. Please forgive me. After we got married, you rarely listened to me, and when I told you about the hidden camera, you didn't believe me. Do you realize how much that hurt me? I didn't want to believe Mom could do something like that. I hoped everything would be fine if I denied your claims. I was kind of aware since Mom had been calling me about what you were doing at home." "You knew about the hidden camera and the clock?" It wasn't that I knew for sure, but I wanted an easy way out. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you in any way." But his apologies now felt hollow. Knowing that he was aware of the hidden camera, yet still blamed me and thrust divorce papers at me, was unforgivable. "I've recorded our conversation. As for the divorce settlement, be prepared to pay. Whether or not I'll press charges against Isabel depends on how you make amends." Following negotiations, Daniel agreed to pay a compensation of 3 million yen. Meanwhile, interactions with mother-in-law, who was held in detention, were done through my attorney. "I don't want to be a criminal. Please forgive me." During a meeting with her lawyer, I heard she was inconsolable and continuously wept. In the end, mother-in-law was released after paying a settlement of 1 million yen. However, the news of her spying quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. With her high pride, mother-in-law became too embarrassed to step outside, becoming isolated as neighbors and acquaintances kept their distance. Daniel, who always defended mother-in-law, also faced cold stares. It seems no one expects him to find a young and beautiful partner, let alone remarry. Since we worked at the same place, the news of our divorce spread quickly. The awkwardness at work was palpable, and before long, Daniel resigned. On the other hand, I've managed to move on from both mother-in-law and Daniel, and I am now very happy. My hard work has been recognized, and I even received a promotion. I believe that after hardships in life, happiness will always come around. With that belief, I'm living each day to the fullest.